Hi, I'm Aaron Brown and welcome to Play.Sound. Today, I'm going to be covering how to make a seamlessly looping audio file. This is useful for things like music, ambiences, emitters, and all sorts of other files you're going to be making in your games. Now, I know everyone has their own methods of how to do this using their own applications, but I'm going to share mine and hopefully it helps you out, or makes you think of it in a different way, or improves yours. If you have your own and you think it's better than mine, please share it. I'd love to hear it. Without further ado, let's get started.
Okay, so I've set up a session to show the tail to front looping method. And basically what this means is you take the tail of whatever your music is, or whatever your ambience is, or whatever your sound effect is, you put it to the front, and then you crossfade. So it's tail to front, then crossfade. So I made a little music cue to demonstrate this. And this is the MIDI. I've disabled it to save CPU. But here is how it sounds. So it's kind of a tense music cue. It's got a lot of reverb, which is going to really help in this demonstration. All right, so the first and best method to loop your music is to make a duplicate of the MIDI, copy it to the end, and then bounce it. Now what this does is you have this full track right here. So this would be all the main meat of the track. Then you duplicate it over so that you have the beginning going again. So now the natural tail of the track ends here and overlaps with your original start. So that automatically blends the tail of your first track with the start of your first track. So now you have something that sounds like this. Now compare that start to this start. You see how there's a little bit more going on in this one? And you can tell because if you try to loop this as it was without the tail blending with the start, it sounds like this. See how that doesn't sound natural? It sounds halted. It's because it is halted. The reverb has been cut off. So what you can do is take this new start and make it your initial start. So what you do is click and drag this up. I've already done it. You'd click and drag this up here, the meat of the track here, to two separate tracks. And then you find a nice crossfade point. Usually that's going to be when the tail ends, you find a nice hit to do a crossfade just before the crossfade. In this case, you can hear it just like this. See how I did the crossfade right before that hit? And you can't tell at all. So now we have the new start, which is a blend of the tail and the start that was naturally done when we bounced the track. And we have the meat of the track, and we have a crossfade in between them before a transient and after the tail ends. So it sounds like this. Now that will definitely loop because, as you can see, we've made the edit on a natural point where they blend. These will definitely not have a pop because the waveform is perfectly matched. So this will work every time, and it's the best reliable way. If you've made your own music, always try to do this method where you duplicate it, copy to the front, and crossfade. So you can hear it loop just like this. And a perfect crossfade is done. So what you can do is I bust it to a different track and you can record it in. Okay, now that it's been recorded, you just rename it. We'll call it Mux Loop 01, which is super generic and terrible, but you know, it's good for this video. And you can hear it loop by auditioning it, playing right before the end. And it's a perfect loop. So you have your track, you're done. You have created your loop. Now, here are some other scenarios where it's not so easy. All right, so let's say you bounced your track, but you didn't do the method where you duplicate it. And all you did was left a natural tail of the reverb or the cymbals or whatever instruments carry over after the track is done. Now that sounds like this at the end of the track. So you can see there's quite a bit in that tail, and that was naturally blended here, but here we're going to have to blend it ourselves. So what you can do is copy this up here and copy the main track here. Now I always do a small fade in on the main meat of the track, and this is important because that initial waveform has to be the same naturally as it was. So this needs to match this. So to do that, this tail has to have the same waveform shape. So the first part you want to fade in 4 samples, well, however many samples, but 4 works for me, to the meat of the track. Have the tail here. Now you're just blending the tail with the intro like this did naturally. So let's hear that. Now I already did some work and got it done. That's it. Sometimes you'll have to turn tracks down if they've been mastered so they're at 0 dB or near 0 dBFS. You're going to want to turn them down, 1 or 2, just so you can make these edits and not clip the output. As you can see, if I didn't do that, you can see right there it clipped. So again, that's why you want to give yourself a little bit of headroom. Turn these down. You can always normalize it or turn it up after. So all you would do here is the same thing. You bus it to a track, record it in. Okay, and as you can see, again, we can test it, name it, Mux Loop 02, copy it, take a listen, and it's a perfect loop. And again, that is because we've taken the tail and blended it with the front. So the tail to front and crossfade is pretty much the name of the game here. Now, here's another scenario, kind of the worst case, I think. If you've been delivered music that doesn't have a tail, somebody just bounced the track and they didn't leave room for a tail at the end for the natural reverb or any instruments. One thing I do to fix this is make my own fake reverb tail. So let's hear what it would sound like without this done. It just halts, and it's a horrible loop. It's just very halting. It sounds like a bad loop. It sounds like you looped your music and it's not natural. So one way to fix that is to make your own reverb tail. So you can take a last bit of your main track, copy it down, and then do what I've done here, which is just kind of fade it in, blend it so that this one fades out, the original fades out, and the reverb version fades in. Now when you blend the two, it's going to sound a little more like a natural reverb tail. And it's important that you use, well, a reverb that matches the original reverb. And if there is no reverb in the original track, you can try a plate. A very short plate sometimes sounds more like the natural track and is still convincing, but I happen to know what reverb I used on my track, so I've matched the settings, and here you go. So, as you can hear, it's got a nice natural fade out. It sounds blended, and it sounds like we've left the tail out with the original recording. So you can see that ends here. So you select all that, and you record all that in. Okay, now I've already done that previously. So what I did is I copied that up here, but you can see what this looks like. This was right here. So all you're doing is creating a version that was similar to the last edit we've done. This is now this, because you have a track with a tail now. You've created a fake tail using your reverb. So now you just cut that, put that at the front, do another blend, turn things down so they don't clip, and record it like we did before. I'm not going to record it this time. I think you get the idea. Okay, so let's get into some sound effects. This is the same concept. Again, tail to front with crossfade. So let's say we have this ambience. So I recorded that in the green belt near my house. It's got some cicadas and some birds. So let's say you want to make a looping ambience. You can pick any neutral spot in the wave file, make an edit like I've done here. And see how there's no big birds chirping there. It's kind of neutral. So that's a good place to make an edit. Then you copy that to the front. You take the meat, you put it on the end. And that sounds like this when you're all done. Now, if you wanted, you could get rid of that fly that's in there. I didn't mind it. You know, you can adjust these crossfades to do whatever you want, because that's not what matters. What matters is you've made an edit on a waveform point that perfectly loops, because it's the same waveform. It's a natural looping point. So by lining up that here and this here, you've taken that point and made them line up. So this crossfade here can do whatever you want, which is why I don't recommend doing a crossfade on one track. 2 tracks is better because you can adjust all these parameters. You can get rid of something here. You can move this here so this sounds like this now. So that got rid of the fly, and you have a natural crossfade point. So let's go on to a different kind of sound effect, which is a train. So with sounds like these, it's important that you don't let the movement and the repetitions sound unnatural at a loop point. You have to kind of feel the cadence and when it goes up and down and when things move within the sound so that your loop point doesn't sound unnatural. So again, take the tail, put it to the front, take that, put it to the end, crossfade. Tail to front, crossfade. I wanted to note that this edit point doesn't matter where it is. It can be anywhere that's fairly neutral that fits the sound, because what matters is you're taking the edit point and that lines up here and that lines up here. So this natural edit point where the waveform is perfect and will blend perfectly is now here to here. So as long as that lines up with that, it's going to be a perfect loop. So let's see how that sounds with the crossfade. Now, as you can see, that perfectly loops, and that is because of all the things I've said before. This edit point is a perfect spot to have this blend with this. So again, you'd record that in. I'm not going to do it because I think you get the process at this point. Record it in. Now it's a perfectly seamlessly looping file. Now what some people like to do is go into the file and make a short fade in of 10 samples. I don't do this. I feel like most of the times these things play in game, they have a fade in. As long as I have that perfect looping point, it doesn't really matter. Some people say it matters when you start introducing MP3 conversion into the process, because it will alter that wave so that it won't match perfectly and it might add a pop. But you can hear how this sounds just like this. So even with those short fade ins and fade outs, you can't hear it. It's just a way to make it loop perfectly. So a few samples of a fade in and a fade out on your looping tracks can be a really good idea, especially if you're dealing with MP3 conversions. And that's it. So I hope you like this method, the tail to front and crossfade looping method. If you like it, please leave a comment, share it with your friends. If you think you have an improvement, please share it. I'd love to hear what you do to loop your files. Thanks again, and come back soon for more tutorials.